Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we are diving deep into one of the most high-stakes questions in all of medical education. How do you set, evaluate, and, if you have to, adjust exam cut scores in a way that is fair, valid, and most importantly, rigorously defensible?
So picture this. Your big final exam is done, the results are in, and, oh no, the failure rate is double what you've ever seen. What do? Do you panic? Do you just curve the grades and call it a day? The answer is neither. Today, we're going to walk through the exact protocol to handle this kind of challenge with psychometric precision.
So here's the game plan. We're going to follow the entire life cycle of a high-stakes exam. We'll start by setting the standard before the test. Then we'll run some post-exam quality control, reassess that cut score with real data, and finally, make a principled adjustment, all while asking that critical question, how much is too much?
Okay, let's get right into it. A truly defensible process starts way before any student even sits for the test. The gold standard here is setting what's called a criterion-referenced pass mark. This isn't about grading on a curve. It's about defining what a student absolutely must know to be considered competent, regardless of how their classmates perform.
Now, when you're setting that standard, you've got some really powerful tools in your toolbox. The Modified Angoff method is a total workhorse for multiple choice questions. It literally asks a panel of experts to estimate the odds that a minimally competent candidate would get each question right. The EBLE method adds another layer, factoring in not just difficulty, but also how important the topic is. And for more modern tests, the bookmark method is fantastic, especially when you're using item response theory. To make this all feel a bit more real, let's follow a case study. We've got a 100-item exam. An expert panel went through it, and using that Modified Angoff method, they decided that a minimally competent candidate should get a 70% to pass. So, that 70%, that's our starting point. That's our initial defensible standard.
Okay, so the standard is set at 70. But now the exam is over, and the scores are, well, they're unexpectedly low. Now your first impulse, and let's be honest, it's everyone's first impulse, might be to just adjust the grades. But hold on. The first correct step is always to run a tough quality check on the test itself.
You should think of this like a clinical protocol. First, you check the exam's overall reliability, its internal consistency, using a statistic like KR20. For a high-stakes test, you really want to see that number north of 0.80. Next, you put every single question under the microscope looking for flawed items. And finally, you do a quick audit of the blueprint, just to make sure the test actually measured what you wanted it to measure.
And this all comes down to one absolutely crucial principle. If a question is flawed, if it's poorly worded, or if the test itself isn't reliable, the burden of that mistake is on us, the educators. It is not on the students. You have to fix the instrument before you can judge the performance.
So, back to our case study. We run the quality check, and yep, we find some problems. The reliability is a little low at 0.74, and we find two questions that are actually making the test worse. So after we rekey one of them and just drop the other one completely, the reliability jumps up to a very healthy 0.81. This little fix bumps the class average from a 64 to a 66%, but we're still not at that 70% pass mark.
Now, and only now that we're sure we have a psychometrically sound exam, can we start to ask, was our standard of 70 maybe a little too high for the specific test? And to answer that question, we turn to something called compromise methods.
The Hofstee method is just a fantastic tool for this. And what's so brilliant about it is that it's proactive. Before the exam is even given, your expert panel defines the absolute floor and ceiling for both the cut score and the failure rate. Basically, they create a pre-approved zone of reasonableness for you.
Okay, so this is where the magic happens. You take your actual student performance data, and you plot it against those boundaries that the panel already agreed on. And right where the student performance curve crosses the line defined by the panel's limits, bam, that's your new data-informed cut score. It respects both the expert judgment and the actual student performance.
So, for our case study, remember the panel had decided that any cut score between 60% and 75% that resulted in a fail rate between 5% and 20%, that would be acceptable. Well, guess what? The Hofstee method found the perfect intersection point for our group of students right at 65%. So, we've got our new defensible standard, 65%. Now, the big question is, how do you actually apply this to the student grades? You've got to be clear and transparent about it.
You basically got two main ways to do this. The preferred method is the most direct. You just announce that the cut score for this particular exam has been set to 65%. Simple. But if your institution has a policy that requires a fixed pass mark, say 70%, you can do a mathematically equivalent boost. In this case, you just add 5 points to every student's score. The pass-fail outcome is exactly the same. The real key, either way, is just being transparent about what you did and why.
And this leads us to the final, and maybe the most critical question of all. We decided on a 5-point adjustment. But why not 10 or 20? I mean, how do you know when you've gone too far? This is where you absolutely need psychometric guardrails.
The most important guardrail is a concept called the standard error of measurement, or SEM. Look, no test is perfectly precise. Think of the SEM as the margin of error for any given test score. It helps us quantify that uncertainty and tells us the likely range where a student's true ability actually lies.
For our 100-item case study exam, after all our quality fixes, the SEM calculates out to be 5.2 percentage points. So what does that actually mean? It means for a student who scored, let's say a 68, their true score, their real level of knowledge, is very likely bouncing around somewhere between about a 63 and a 73.
So here are the 2 big rules that will keep you out of trouble. Rule number 1, your new cut score must land within those Hofstee boundaries your expert panel already agreed on. No exceptions. And rule number 2, which is a great rule of thumb, any class-wide adjustment that's bigger than 1 to 2 times the SEM, that should be a huge red flag. It probably means the exam itself is fundamentally broken, not that the students all underperformed.
And this right here is the final check on our whole process. Our 5-point boost is just under 1 SEM of 5.2, and it landed perfectly inside those preset Hofstee bounds. This gives us rock-solid confidence that we've made a reasonable, defensible adjustment, not just an arbitrary curve to make the numbers look better.
So, let's put it all together on one simple checklist. You start with an integrity check on the test. You go through the reliability gate. You triage every single item. Only then do you reassess the standard with a method like Hofstee. You implement the change transparently, you check it against your magnitude guardrails, and, this is crucial, you document absolutely everything. This is your protocol for turning panic into a principled response.
And we'll end with this question for you to think about. If you adopt a process that is this rigorous, this transparent, and this evidence-based, is that unexpected outcome really a crisis? Or is it just a valuable data point that helps you make your assessments even better next time?